On this week's GMAC interview, we are delighted to be joined by entrepreneur James McCormack.
When I was drinking a lot, it was kind of like I was a shell of myself, or a shell of my potential.
Founder of the Dublin Barista School and most recently, Oil. Optimize your life.
I had a breaking point. I said from that day when I saw the picture that I'm changing.
James tells a wonderful story about trials and tribulations and, most importantly, learnings from business.
We work with over 200 schools. We have worked with all the government agencies. We're training about 20,000 people a year.
So without any further ado, here's James McCormack.
The All Walks podcast is now in your ear.
Go live! We're delighted to have with us this week James McCormack, founder and CEO of Oil, an incredibly interesting company that we're going to discuss. Here we are in the beautiful Vico rooms at the Queen's in Dalkey. Welcome.
Greg, thanks a million for having me. It's great to reconnect after 12 years. No, longer.
Yeah, but apart from
2000.
Ordering at your...
Yeah, I don't think I ever saw you.
Takeaway, delivery man mainly brought the food. But yeah, it's been about 16 years, 2008.
And we donned the pitch together and we won. I don't know the name of the cup that we won, but we won a cup.
We won a Leinster medal. That's it,
a Leinster medal. That was it.
I'm not sure if it's the highest of standards, but we survived.
It was good.
How's everything going?
Everything's good, yeah. Life is good. Very, very busy. Family, business, and everything else. And yeah, so can't complain. Everything is positive.
You competed at High Rocks last weekend, and before we talk about that, to those who don't know, explain what High Rocks is.
Well, High Rocks is the fastest growing kind of sports competition in the world at the moment. So it's absolutely an unbelievable event. There's just to explain it, it's an indoor event in an indoor arena. So the event that I was at, and I actually didn't compete in it because I was injured, but the company had a stand at it, so I was working at it. But essentially, it was in the London Olympia, Olympia, which it's a beautiful spot. And so how they do it is they have 8 different events internally, and then they have a track going on the outside of it. So for every event that you do, so it might be like a sled pull, rowing 1,000 meters, a ski erg, sled push, and they've 8 of those. I'm calling them events, but they're probably called something
Disciplines.
else. And when you complete each one of those, when you complete each one of those, you have to do a 1 kilometer run as fast as you can, and then you go straight into the next one. So I think it's the fastest growing sports event in the world because it's accessible to anybody. And it's not like a CrossFit or something like extreme, like Olympic lifting. It's something that the general person can do. So they had like 4,000 athletes per day for 3 days. So there's 12,000 athletes. And it was going from 6:30 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. It was like an unbelievable machine, and it was a brilliant event to be at. There was like DJs, there's loud music, there's thousands of people watching you. And it's like kind of like very much, it's not like quite like Gladiators, but like it's
So it's fascinating. And you were there as part of Oil.
Yeah, so we were. Yeah, so Oil is my mushroom coffee company. So we are the official coffee partners for High Rocks this year.
Oh.
So it was a big deal because they only have about 10 or so partners, like brands that they work with. So it's not as if they have like hundreds of small little partners. They have just 10. Like, so we were working with Puma, we were working with Built for Athletes, Humantra, so there's MyProtein, for example. So like they're like the biggest brands in the world, basically, that we're kind of working alongside.
Brilliant. What an opportunity.
Yeah, it was huge. Yeah, so like it's like anything, you have to take these opportunities when they come. We started talking to High Rocks last year. They were looking for something, not just a coffee partner, but they're looking for a coffee partner that was unique. And we ticked that box for them in terms of we add mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms into our coffee. And so they wanted to partner with us because it was giving their athletes an edge. And that's kind of like the ethos of our brand, is like you're always people who are looking for that 1% benefit, I suppose. And that's what High Rocks is all about. So it was a match.
The OYL, Oil, is an acronym for Optimize Your Life.
Optimize your life, yeah. So,
smart.
And creating a brand name is not easy, but after multiple iterations.
Yeah.
Oil, like it's oil. There's oil in coffee, So it's spelled OYL. We like the connotation of oil in general as being a negative thing, but like we want it to be a positive thing. And optimizing your life is what this is all about. So like it's in the bag that I've given you. There's it's all natural ingredients. It's a natural product.
This is the bag here.
Yeah. So it's coffee
Nice
is
packaging.
Coffee is a natural product. I've worked in coffee for the last 15 years, and the medicinal mushrooms, which for people who don't know, are extremely powerful for your health. They offer multiple different health benefits.
Yeah.
So it's a world that I found a number of years ago, and I became obsessed with it. And that's
really looking forward to going into that detail, because it's an area I know nothing about. So I'm excited about that part of the chat. If we go all the way back, so you leave school, you go through college, and you're going into the business world. What were your first steps?
Well, my first steps getting into business was multiple failures as a general employee. I wasn't a very good employee across the board.
What line of work were you in?
Funnily enough, one of my first jobs was literally about 5 doors down the road from here,
Okay.
in Sherry Fitzgerald's in Dalkey.
Okay.
And my family, the property was in my family, so it was always a thing where, you feel like you just follow the thing that your family does. So my dad is a property developer, and so my brothers worked in property management and stuff like that. So I got a job in Sherry Fitzgerald, and I lasted about 6 months because I was a bit dozy. I kept on leaving doors open and windows open when I was doing viewings and stuff like that. I'd just come back from a year's traveling in Southeast Asia, so there was a lot of THC involved, possibly, where my motor skills might have been the best.
Yeah.
So I really liked it. Like, I loved Dalkey, I loved working there. But so after 6 months, I moved into a bank. I thought that'd be a good place to move into. Like, it was at this age, I'm 25 years old. I didn't really have an iota.
Yeah.
After doing business in college, what I should be doing or what I was good at even. So I worked in a bank for a year, got fired from there. Being a back office worker, which isn't my personality type, doing spreadsheets and stuff like that.
Were you leaving doors and windows open in the bank? Or?
Well, I was probably leaving loads of spreadsheets incomplete. But I did learn how to build formulas and all that interesting spreadsheet stuff.
Love it.
And then actually, a guy that Dennis Barnett, was talking to me, and he was working as a mortgage broker, and he goes, James, you have to get involved in this because I'm just making so much money. Well, that's what he told me. Maybe he wasn't.
Good on
That's how I interpreted what he was saying. So I got a job as a mortgage broker. So my first job as a mortgage broker was working for this one-man band, and basically he was. This is another job I got let go from. So there's a theme arising here. So I worked for this guy for 6 months. Really nice guy, but and looking back, I understand. Like, I wasn't bringing in him enough money. But just a month before he let me go, I landed a gig with a property developer who had just built a huge property development out in Ashtown, and they allowed me to be their on-site mortgage broker.
Okay.
So basically, I was just there. Like, I was working 7 days a week at this stage, all the hours, because I was so scared of failing in this job. I just was trying to do everything I could not to fail. So I worked 7 days a week. I was out on this site on the weekends. I was taking names and numbers, and suddenly I started getting a few sales. But it was he was at the end of his tether. It was like, I'm not getting enough sales. To me, weren't paying me 30 grand or 35 grand a year plus the phone and whatever. And so I left him and I went into the Irish Mortgage Corporation, which was a big company based in the city centre. And I was the first person to bring a property development as a general employee into the business, and I just skyrocketed in terms of my sales. And there was 50 salespeople in the business, and I went to the top 3, I think, very, very quickly, which was a very, very good place to be. Those 3 failures in business really kind of hurt me, even though I didn't let it on, because no one wants to be a failure. So I worked. I was the first in the office. I was the last to leave every day. I'd work weekends on the site. I'd hammer their database, remortgaging people. I was just on a mission to succeed. So I spent 3 years in that company, And 3 very, very good years. I did really, really well as a salesperson. So I was naturally good at speaking and talking about the benefits of mortgages and all that type of stuff. And I made money, and I was able to get a mortgage and buy a house and all that type of stuff. This was pre-kids.
When it's interesting, you know, you go from the bank, working in Sherry Fitzgerald's, you now find yourself in a space where you were exceptionally focused, where it seemed like you weren't before. Was there a conscious effort to say, right, I got to get my shit together?
I think so. Like, it was definitely a subconscious effort anyway. I think the key word is focus. I was so focused on not failing. I think that was the thing. It was less focused on succeeding. It was more focusing, I can't have this number 4 company telling me.
And was that a pride thing? Were you beginning to feel, even though people mightn't have been saying it to you, did you kind of get a sense that people were looking at you that, you know?
I think it was more maybe the acceptance of my dad, probably more than anything. I didn't want to let him down. He was still alive at that time. And obviously with your peers and stuff, you don't want to be considered a loser and a failure. Don't think anybody wants that. So I went in, I just hammered and I did 7 days a week for I don't know how long. I didn't care. I'd work all the hours. I think that's my one defining feature. Like, I might not be the most talented, but I'll work the hardest. So that went really well until December 2008 when the crash came. And the company that employed, I think maybe there were like 170 people, zoomed down to 10 people overnight, and they let everyone go. So I was out without a job. So I was back in that familiar situation where I didn't have a job. I didn't feel so bad because it wasn't because of me personally. And then that was when the decision happened, is what do we do next? And I think working for myself was always something I wanted to do. Starting a business was always something I wanted to do. Was in my family. My dad was an entrepreneurial character. He had more on the Wild West kind of entrepreneurs, where everything was it was on the edge of what was legal probably. But I started my first business called Good Mood Food in April 2009, and the reason why I started a food company, a catering company, was because I had no money, and this was the easiest sector to start a business in. I thought at the time, but social media wasn't a thing, and being a personality on TV, it was never going to be a thing for me. So it was like, what can I do that I know that I can make money at? So my wife gave me €500 to start. And talking about focus, like when you have €500 to start a business, you're very, very focused on what can I do with this money? I need every single cent of this, penny of this to last and to work. The next idea was a sandwich business, and the basic idea was that I needed to make sandwiches, and I would bring it into Sandiford Industrial Estate and sell it to offices, and essentially that's what I did. So I took €500. I found a kitchen in Stillorgan, and that I could sublet. There was a lady who operated like a bigger catering company, and she allowed me to use the kitchen from 5 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock, 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. It was like €100 a week or something like that. So I gave her the €100, and then I built a website, which by today's standards is terrible, for €200, but still very, very cheap. And it was just a basic couple of pages talking about who we were, and there was an ordering sheet on it where you could order your chicken stuffing sandwich or whatever, and we would deliver it to your office. No payments capabilities. It was just an email that I'd received saying, John in Company X ordered a ham and cheese sandwich, we'll deliver it by 11 or something. And so that was €300 that I'd spent. And then the rest of it went on raw materials like bread and ingredients and packaging and stuff like that. So at the end of it, I had no money. So I had to make it work. And so I incorporated the business. No, I actually didn't. I was a sole trader in April, and it wasn't until the 6th of November that I actually go out, the scariest day of my life, into the kitchen at 5 a.m. in the morning in Stillorgan, freezing November morning, and to go out and to knock on doors in Sandiford Industrial and sell sandwiches. So and that's what I did. It was very, very daunting, and it was probably the hardest thing I ever did. But the first sale I ever got, like, I was amazed that someone would actually buy a sandwich off me. I remember it was a chicken Caesar wrap someone bought off me. And my wife, Linda, worked in Mount Marion at the time. Not Mount Marion, sorry, on Marion Road. And I remember I used to have a little money bun bag with me where I keep the float. And I went back to her on the first day and I counted the money. I made €17.50 or something. That was my turnover. And I was actually over the moon that I'd made that much money. It was proving my concept in a very small way that I can do this.
Yeah.
And the salesperson in me got going, so I went home that day. I rang 20 companies and said, would you mind if I knocked into you tomorrow? This is what we're doing. Everyone of them said, yeah. I did that for, 2 weeks in a row until I found the biggest and best companies that were going to work with me. So I'd start a sandwich route around Sandyford Industrial Estate of 15 companies who had enough staff who, when I walked in, they'd email all their staff and they'd walk out to me in the reception area and they'd hand me over cash for a sandwich. That's how it worked.
But there was no Deliveroo, there was no Uber Eats at that stage, was there?
No, there's nothing. No.
So there's the start of what's pretty common now. People order coffees, people order food.
Affordable, cheap sandwiches. I was selling them for like €2.50, €3 because my overheads were so low, and I managed it so tightly. You wouldn't believe, but like the second day I made €25. Then every day it went up, and suddenly I was making enough to pay myself a wage and
pay your wife back.
Yeah, eventually. I don't think she's actually seen it back yet, but maybe indirectly.
How long did it take before you were at the stage where you were going, Jesus, I've got a wage now, I can live a little bit more?
I'd say about a month.
That's it.
Yeah, I'd say it was about.
So that would have been about December then, going into January of the following year.
Around that time, I was selling a couple of hundred sandwiches a day, maybe, or something like that.
So we know with the product life cycle, you have your introduction, your growth, your maturity, your saturation, and then your decline. At what stage of that life cycle did you say, right, I've got to move on now onto my next venture?
Well, it kind of happened organically because the woman I was subletting the kitchen from, I got too busy and I was basically over encroaching on her business. So she asked me to leave politely.
Did she really?
Okay. So that was obviously like, all right, okay, this is a big move. And so I asked my brothers who were working in commercial property what to do. And my older brother connected me with a guy on Leeson Street who owned a cafe. It was on Leeson Lane there beside the Department of Transport. And he had a coffee shop. So I went in and met him on a Wednesday. And by the following Monday, I was running a 60-seater cafe. And I really I liked the place because they had a little production kitchen.
Yeah.
Where I could continue my sandwich business.
And you're more in town. You're hitting another.
It was
market.
more in town. We once we got that premises, things started to grow very, very fast. I didn't have the skills to deal with that growth because I had no experience in business. All I knew what to do was sell, and I knew how to build a product at that stage. I knew how to make a sandwich. I knew what was important about, fresh bread and reasonably good ingredients.
Reasonably good.
Reasonably good. Let's ham and cheese sandwiches. Come on.
Yeah.
But we got like a bank that had 100 employees who needed. So a bank paid us a contract to deliver individual lunches to 100 people every day. That's changed now since. But this is what I got. I started getting all of I went from individual sandwiches to platters, which obviously multiplies the numbers very, very quickly. So I started getting all of the professional services companies, all of the accountants and solicitors who were doing their weekly meetings. So we started to really do well. A friend of mine was working out in Bill Cullen's Europa Academy, so out in Swords. He approached me, said, will you take on their kitchen? And I was like, okay, this is my opportunity to expand. So I took that on, and we started our sandwich route out in Swords, which retrospectively was probably a mistake because it was a lot of travelling.
A lot of bandwidth.
And Bill Cullen had a whole community, that whole place where he'd do his seminars. He would do his seminars, and he'd have people coming in, and then we would be the kitchen that would serve them hot food. So I'd never done hot food before. I was just doing sandwiches. So suddenly I was a chef serving 200 people. Fish pie.
Who made the fish pie?
Me.
Did you?
Yeah. I used to ring my mum up and ask her, how do I put all this stuff together? So I'd be on the phone to her on my Nokia, and she'd be telling me how to make the fish pie and the chicken broccoli bake.
For 200 people?
Yeah.
Jeez, man.
I was just multiplying everything out, and I was fairly good at it as it happened. I could do it. We served 200 people on multiple different occasions, and so everything started to happen very, very fast. And to me, that was normal. This is like everything that was happening. Like taking over that 60-seater cafe was normal. After like 3 days, after 1 day of talking to them, but then loads of stuff started to happen. Well, particularly, I wouldn't know where to start with all the things that actually started to happen. But on one occasion, the sheriff came, and the revenue sheriff called in. He said, "We're taking all of your seats and tables and chairs out of here now." And I was like, "Why?" And he said, "But you haven't paid your taxes." And I was like, "I have paid my taxes, and like we're the new tenants in this property, and you can't take them. You can't take all this stuff." "We can. I'm taking them." And we had a queue out the door of people. I'd say we had 50 people queuing into the place. So I had to go out to him and I handed him €1,000 cash just to stop him coming in. And it turns out that the guys I sublet the property off had accrued a massive revenue bill, because they were what had happened, and I found out after, was that they had a load of properties that they couldn't afford to pay, and they were basically using the coffee shop as a cash flow machine for themselves, or a cash machine. So they would get in a supplier, they would sell all of the stuff that supplier gave them, they would renege on paying that supplier, they would get a new supplier in and do that over and over again. Okay. So they were taking all the cash, they weren't paying their tax, they weren't paying their suppliers, they were taking that cash just to try and live, I think, or I don't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
But they were basically bankrupted. And then I had a load of debt collectors come in, and I was assaulted at one stage by a debt collector who assumed I was the guy who owed them money, which wasn't true. So
when you say assaulted,
I kind of like, he didn't badly assault me, like he hit me, not in the face, but like.
You'd be well able for that.
Oh yeah, but I was well able for it, but it was still a bit of a shock when some random guy comes in and tries to assault you.
So essentially, because of the previous company, they started slowly knocking on your door, but you were still trying to drive your new business.
I was trading then and unaware. Like, I suppose it's kind of very naive, because I'd never started a business. I didn't know how things really worked. Just the path that I had taken was probably a little bit unusual. The way I sublet a kitchen, started making sandwiches, got this new premises after like basically no negotiations, so it was just on a very kind of weak lease agreement, and serving 60 people. I'd never made a cup of coffee in my life at this stage, and we're selling loads, like we're selling very bad coffee, I would imagine. And I always remember my wife coming in that first week, and was when I'd started, all the staff who were supposed to turn up, the old staff, most of them left, because obviously they knew what was happening. With not paying people and all that type of stuff. So I had one person who showed up to help me. I'd never made a coffee before. We had 60 people coming. Oh God. Or maybe more. It was probably like 120. So at the end of that lunch, tables were stacked full of plates. There was no one there to clean them. So my wife came in on her lunch break in her high heels. I started cleaning tables. It was funny and embarrassing. But
so what year was that?
This is 2010.
2010.
So it feels like a long time ago, but I can look back now as happy enough memories, because at the time it was very stressful.
Did you come out of that stage with debt collectors and
I figured that out basically. And actually, what I ended up doing was I ended up paying the sheriff directly their debt, but I took it off my rent, so I didn't pay my landlords.
Okay.
The rent, because I ended up paying the sheriff directly, because they wouldn't engage with them, and it was all a bit.
So you took a bit of a hit because you believed in what you were doing and you wanted it just gone.
Yeah, and that tactic worked. I don't know, like the sandwich business was never a passion project. It was more of spotting a business I could start with €500.
Wow, that's a great story.
And it was more kind of entrepreneurial, rather than, compared to say when we get to oil, it's more of a passion project, or a passion business. So there are two different styles of businesses, and but like those early days were fraught with a lot of stress for me, a lot of naivety. I didn't know I didn't do a lot of things right. Like I didn't follow a lot of the corporate governance right. I didn't follow accountancy rules right. I didn't pay my staff correctly. The one thing about me and business is that I always find a way to make it work. I mean, any of the businesses that have failed, which are two companies that have failed now. So they failed because they kind of had to fail. But as I was working, I suppose as an entrepreneur, I made them work for me, and in terms of being able to be a provider for my family, so making sure that I was able to pay myself a salary legally, and move on. So like that's why the next part of the story is 2 years later I had 3 companies. Now I had no right to start 3 companies because I had no experience to do that, but my confidence in myself was so strong, I thought I was able to do it. So I started Dublin Barista School, which is still a company that I own. So in 2010 I started Dublin Barista School, and that was basically teaching people how to make coffee on our coffee machine in our coffee shop, the one that I'd taken over. And I'd run a course once a month, and we'd have 6 people paying to come in, and that business there was demand there from day one for that business.
Wow. Just people who were maybe looking to start a coffee shop and who wanted to learn how to make a flat white.
You have to remember at that time as well, like the economy was in tatters, and people, like, unemployment was very, very high, so people were looking to get themselves into employment by upskilling. And so they're coming to us to get a certificate to get a job in hospitality. So that was kind of where we started. And then a year later I started El Porco Loco, which is a company you're familiar with, which is a Mexican. So a lot of things happened in between when I started 2009 to 2012. My mother had passed away in 2010, November 2010, so a year after. I remember I sent her a message saying, "Mom, I'm so proud." Can I get emotional now? Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, Mom, I'm so proud. I did my first year in business, and she had just passed away. I didn't know. The message I sent to her went to her phone, but she passed away in her sleep. She was only like 67. She was still very young.
Not an easy time for you.
No, that was 2010, and I sent her that message anyway. And so, you know, when your mum passes away, there's a lot of emotion, and so my dad had passed away in 2007, so a few years previous to that. And so I felt there was a need for me to step up as the family provider, say. Not just for my wife, but for my siblings. That my family didn't have a head of the family. I felt that I should step up and try to be the head of the family. So I made a lot of rash decisions. Basically, I expanded the business quickly, the sandwich business very, very quickly. I went back to the lady in Stillorgan. I sublet the kitchen off. And I bought her out.
Okay.
But I was being.
Was that where El Porco Loco was?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was pre El Porco Loco, and I started the sandwich business from there as a part of an expansion plan. I was like, I'm going to be the head of the family. This is what I was internally saying to myself anyway. I'm going to be the head of the family. I'm going to provide for everybody. I'm going to deploy my whole family. And I employed 2 of my brothers. And it was very much an emotionally driven period, because when you're making decisions through emotion, they're not always the best decisions. So I started this expansion plan, and I expanded too fast, and I basically stretched myself too thin, and I took on that unit that eventually became El Porco Loco, and which was a Mexican food business. At that time there was a huge Mexican food business craze, and I went into business with my friend Simon, who was a brilliant cook. He was on MasterChef Ireland. He still is an exceptional cook.
To good jalapeno poppers.
Oh yeah, well, you know,
delicious.
I can't say that they were handmade, but
I didn't think they were. I didn't think you were rolling them up with your hands. No.
But like, our burritos were amazing in that place.
Yeah, they were.
And but it's like a lot of things. There's a lot of nuance to business, and that, like, huge learnings in business. And I woke up one day and we had another letter from Revenue, saying that we owed them 15 grand, which was part of a standard kind of tax period, but we didn't have the money. And I was like, we're generating all this revenue. Where's the money going? I was like, we should have it. And I was positive somebody was stealing from the company.
Okay.
But the reality is that we mismanaged the company in terms of the founders and the owners managing the company. We mismanaged the company, as in we mismanaged the stock. We didn't have correct procedures and protocols in place in terms of how our chefs are making the burritos, as an example, because one chef would make it one way and the next chef would make it the next way. So this created issues. So one chef would put in 150 grams of pulled pork and the next chef would put in 50 grams of pulled pork.
Yeah. And
there'd be all these variations, and customers were getting inconsistent quantities every time they come back, and they were getting annoyed at us, as you do. So it wasn't about the quality of the food per se, it was more about the quality and consistency of what we were giving out. Wasn't there. And I started looking at the stock control very, very closely. And essentially we were just like wasting all of our money through excess stock and bad fridge rotation and dumping too much stuff in the bin. And that equated to about 15 grand in a 2 month period. And we just didn't have the money, we threw it away. So, and that was a massive lesson for me in terms of managing a business and having processes and procedures and how you're managing people, and also building culture around that. I mean, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Yeah.
And I remember doing that stock control every single morning for a whole week. And I got one of our chefs in to come and help me because there was a lot of stock to count. I was like, I'm getting to the bottom of this. It's either this alcoholic chef that we had is either stealing off us, or something else is drastically wrong. And what I found was, by forensically analysing our business, was that we were just throwing it all away because we weren't managing it. All the money was coming into the bank, but we were paying our suppliers doubly as more as we should be. Yeah. And that was the great learning of a food business in terms of managing your KPIs and understanding your margins. And because it's like you can have a great product, but you need the unit economics to work on it.
Yeah,
and then we were approached by a guy who really liked our business, and he said, look, I have a unit in Tala, in the square in Tala. I want you guys to take it. And I was like, cha-ching. It was like Tala was the busiest, fourth biggest population hub in Ireland, the busiest Domino's pizza in Europe.
Yeah, that's right.
And we were like, we couldn't believe it. We thought this was our time to, this was our big break essentially. And we went out, as part of the deal, they were going to fit out or pay for a certain percentage of the fit out. So we did this beautiful fit out, really, really cool. It was a proper, what Tolteca say would be. I think they're actually closed down now as well. But as it turns out, we just couldn't get the customers in the door in Tala, whether it was an educational thing, whether it was just a cultural thing maybe. But we couldn't get the volume of sales that we needed to make it work out there. So these are just things that I remember that we tried everything. We had a beautiful location, shop, great location. It wasn't up at the food hall in Tala, but anyway, long story short, because of the stress, the financial pressure of that particular unit, I ended up having to close the entire company down. Luckily, there was no debt or anything like that owing to anybody. I always made sure that all our suppliers were paid off. There was no debt to revenue even. It was just, this isn't a viable business. I can't keep on doing this.
Were you still running the Dublin Barista School?
Yeah, Dublin Barista School was just consistent. Now, what we did in 2012 was, when the business started to get a bit of traction, we was going from once a month, one course a month, to twice a month, to once a week, to twice a week. And it was doing better than my coffee shop, because the margins in education are much better than the margins in hospitality. People are paying us €150 to attend a class. We can take 6 people for one class, so it was quite profitable. And at that time, it was 2012, literally, business was, lots of companies were failing. There was huge amounts of properties that were vacant. So we went to the street that I wanted, was South Ann Street. At that time was 50% unoccupied, not compared to today. So I found this building on South Ann Street. It was a real quirky kind of 1700, really, €400 building. And I took it at a very reasonable rent. and we put a little coffee shop, a little coffee bar at the front door when you walked in. And then upstairs we made a training room so we could bring our business and make it its own entity. And the good thing about that business model was that the coffee shop allowed us cash flow, regular cash flow, in order to, you know, subsidize what was happening in terms of hiring people. We weren't at a stage where we could run courses every day there. We were only running courses like once a week at the very, very early stages. And so as during that period where I was doing all that other stuff, this business was just ticking along, was bringing in money, and it actually ended up subsidizing the other companies that were failing at some stages. So in terms of starting 3 companies, you know, there's pros and cons of it. The pro was that I had a load of cash flow that allowed me to move money from here to there and to help the other companies that weren't doing well.
Okay.
And the con was, for me, it was getting too much. It was I didn't realize it, but it was becoming overwhelming. The stress, the pressure. I wasn't able to pay a lot of people on time. My phone was nonstop of people chasing me for money. I wasn't able to pay taxes on time. There was just a huge amount of stress that was building up in me. I didn't know how to deal with that stress. Do you know what I mean? I didn't know how to alleviate it, and the only way I knew how to alleviate it was by getting locked. Essentially,
alcohol.
So getting locked is drinking a lot of alcohol. So from the timeline 2009 to 2015, I started 3 companies. I had employed 50, 60 people, probably 50 people at one stage at one time, and I wasn't a people manager. Like I was a doer. I was getting stuff done. I wasn't gonna be going, "Hey Greg, you're doing a great job, high five." I was like, "Why the fuck aren't you doing your job?"
Yeah.
That was my style. But that was all related to stress and pressure, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And me not knowing how to deal with it as an individual. So fast forward to 2015, I had to liquidate 2 of those companies, which was of the 3. So I was very lucky that the barista school, that we have found something that was a very niche market. There was no competition.
So you alluded to the fact that alcohol became a way of coping. So, you know,
Like I had 2 failed companies, and I think there was a lot of shame and embarrassment built around that, as well as the general pressure.
And you had kids at that stage?
My first son, Charlie, 2014. So, look, I mean, I was drinking a lot. I was drinking every day, probably. A lot of secret drinking at home. It was never hard alcohol, but it was always like beer and stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, no, it was, like, talking about it now, it was pretty difficult, but I remember like bringing my son up to bed and feeding him a bottle with my left hand and then putting my right arm down and swinging a beer.
Yeah.
That type of stuff. So at the same time I was functioning, I was able to continue Dublin Barista School, and we were getting busier and busier. I was a shell of myself, or a shell of my potential, let's just say. So in 2017, I had a breaking point, I call it, or a breakdown, or whatever you want to call it. Like, I was on holidays and I was looking at a selfie of me and my kids down in Urca in the south of Spain. What should have been a happy moment was me looking at the picture. I was like saying, "Who's the dude in the picture?" Because I had gone from, when I was, say, playing rugby with you, I was extremely fit and strong. I'd become obese, literally.
Okay.
Very, very overweight, really unhealthy, just constantly and down in a bad mood. And that kind of led me into a change. I said from that day when I saw the picture that I'm changing. So when I went home after that holiday, I just started exercising. I started making small changes, but ultimately I started changing my whole lifestyle around. I gave up alcohol the year after. That was very, very difficult. I started eating just healthier food, and by 2019 I'd run a marathon. By 2020 I had run 5 ultra marathons, but a lot of that was also an extreme to the other end.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, all in retrospect, these things are like, I started asking myself questions. Was like, well, I gave up alcohol. Now I'm running like 80-kilometer mountain runs. Like they're both the same thing, they're both a crutch to something.
Yeah.
So at that stage and during COVID, I was fairly unhappy as a person. I was on a mission to change, and I was using my children as a focal point to that change, because I wanted to be a better dad, and I didn't want to. And this is all like this whole story. I know we don't have a huge amount of time left. It's all relating back to my childhood and about my relationship with my dad and your upbringing, and how I was treated as a young boy at home, and when you go out into the world, and how you deal with all those different or difficult scenarios that life presents to yourself. How do you react to those moments? How I reacted in those moments was I turned to alcohol, because that was one of the things that I learned, because my dad used to do it, and my internal voice was telling me what I felt like as a young boy was that I wasn't good enough, I wasn't loved enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, everyone else is better. Because this was my relationship with my dad. I've since kind of worked out.
Yeah.
So I started doing a lot of therapy, talking to different therapists, just going through this process of understanding, who I am and why I'm doing all these things to myself, why I'm self-sabotaging all the time. And as soon as I started to get a grasp on that, life started becoming more clear, and I started listening to myself a little bit more, and I started to, I think, flourish a little bit more, because I was becoming my own person up until that time. And this is a weird thing, I always say now I'm 44, but I only became a man in my 44th year, because I'd lived my life in that kind of space of trying to make my dad happy. Even though he passed away in 2007, all of my actions were geared towards his approval, even though he wasn't alive even, or subconsciously attracting other people who were going to take his place.
I remember when I went back to the HDIP to become a school teacher, one of the first lectures I went to, I was told that you'll end up teaching the way that you would have wanted to have been taught. That stuck with me with coaching as well, because when I was a young student going into school, I didn't like a teacher who'd stand at the top of the room and just read out a book. You'd come in the next day, you'd be doing geography, and he'd be like, look, we're on page 139, open it up and you read a book. I completely disengaged. So when I became a teacher, I always wanted to teach the way that I would have wanted to be taught. And that was a really good lesson. It seems to you that obviously your upbringing, similar to being in the classroom, you have an opportunity now to practice the way you would have liked to have been practiced on when you were younger, which is being a people person and being very aware of you, who you are, and how to create the best out of yourself and out of people.
I think the role of a parent is to allow your kids the space where they can become themselves and express themselves and have confidence in being able to get up into a room and tell a story, like we were talking at the very, very beginning. And I feel, and it's not like I'm not looking for, there's no pity involved in this. It's like I was never given that space because my dad was quite narcissistic in his manners, and he had to dominate the space in the room all the time. So whether he was in a good mood, he would dominate the room. Whether he was in a bad mood, he would dominate the room, and he wouldn't let any of his kids have their space. Do you know what I mean? To talk or to express themselves. And that's the one thing I was worried that I was going to do to my own kids. You know what I mean? And I was going to dominate and suffocate them. And there's nothing worse than going out into the world and thinking that everyone else is better than you, or thinking that you're worthless. But
by your experiences, that's allowed you as a dad, because it's pretty clear from looking into your life, and we know a lot goes on behind closed doors, but it seems that you're a dad who is very much there for your kids and your learnings and where you've come from, particularly around 2016, 17. You had to have a long, hard look at yourself to the point now where
absolutely, and I think as individuals, we all get these opportunities in life that these really difficult moments are presented to us, and how we act in those moments is basically a result of who we are, or like it's an indication of who we are, should I say. And the person that I was and how I reacted in those really difficult moments, it wasn't good enough. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't it wasn't who I wanted to be. It wasn't what I could be. And very, very easy to stay in that rut.
There will be people listening to the show who are currently in the exact position you were in. Alcohol, drugs, gambling, whatever it might be. They have a vice that's taken them away from an existence that they mightn't be happy about, or business mightn't be going well. What would be the one piece of advice that you would love to communicate with those people now who are listening, looking for inspiration?
To find a reason to live, to find a reason to be better. And I was lucky that I had two amazing kids that I could, they became my North Star, essentially, as in they became bigger than me. So finding something that's bigger than you, I think is, it's not an easy thing to do, I suppose. But my wife is a massive support to me, and like we're the polar opposites in many ways of people, but she always kept me grounded. She never, when the going got particularly tough, she'd always back me and say, you can do this. And I was lucky, very lucky in that regard, that I have Linda, and still do you know what I mean? Because those really difficult moments, it can go either way, I suppose.
Yeah, of course. And, marriages are very, very tough. They're not easy. They're really tough, and that's the purpose of why I love doing these podcasts, is to bring on people like yourself, who very clearly has an entrepreneurial talent and an eye for a gap, and you're telling a story about how things were really tough and how you are here now, looking terrific, looking fit, with a company now that you're really proud of. It's more of passion as well as the economical gains that you get from it.
Yeah.
But talk to me about oil. When did oil start out, and how are you getting on so far?
April 2020 on my couch.
Okay.
It was, I started taking cordyceps militaris mushroom. My coach, Leo Daniel, he sets my programs for me for strength and conditioning and for running when I was doing those ultra marathons and stuff like that. And he said, you should take this cordyceps mushroom. And I was like, I have no idea what this is. So I started taking it. I found it, and I was very much down that rabbit hole of health at that time. I would just buy anything and everything that if I thought it was going to make me better. So I bought the cordyceps stuff. I started putting it in my coffee because that's what I just did naturally. I have a 15-year career in coffee, and I just love coffee. So anything that I was ever experimenting with, I'd typically throw into my coffee. And my VO2 max went from 45 to 55 over a 3-month period. And I know that won't mean much to anybody listening, but it's a massive jump up in your cardiovascular fitness and in my ability to run endurance runs. Basically, that's an indicator of how fit you are. And so that was a massive indicator. Now, it wasn't just the mushrooms. I was obviously training, and I was running regularly, and I was doing lots of different stuff. But that was an indicator to me that those mushrooms were extremely powerful, because I'd never been that fit before. Do you know what I mean? I was running up and down mountains. I was able to run for 12 hours non-stop, essentially. And I got really...
You're running for 12 hours in the ultramarathons non-stop?
Yeah. That was an 80-kilometre run. I should have been running faster, but like...
So, again, just for the record, 80 kilometres, 12 hours, non-stop, off you go.
Yeah, around the Dublin Mountains, yeah. So it was great fun.
Sounds wonderful.
Huge amount of pain. The one thing I learned from endurance running was just like how to be alone with myself and how to really process my thoughts. It's powerful. There's a lot of pain involved in that, but physical pain. But the one thing mentally that was in my mind was hitting that wall, and whenever that wall hit, that I would overcome it. That's what my conversation was for those 12 hours. And whenever the wall hit, I was like, I'm going to go through you. And so I suppose it was important to me to be able to do that some sort of a level to say that I could do anything I wanted, or that I could do anything I wanted to do that I put my mind to.
I feel insignificant at the moment. Listen to I ran about 5 kilometers the other day, and I feel like I'm back, baby.
But there's all sorts of different challenges. It's not just long distance running, and that was just something that happened because I lived in Stepaside during COVID when you couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah, but let's just break it apart. The fact that you said that you were running until you got to the wall and you couldn't wait to get to the wall because you wanted to knock the wall down, that wasn't just something that was loitering around. That must have been something you've been hanging on to for a hell of a long time. And
yeah, I suppose it's going back to that failure stuff. Like, I wanted to prove myself that I wasn't going to fail, and maybe this was another way of me telling myself that I can succeed. I don't know how healthy it was either, but
the coffee with the mushroom helped.
Yeah,
during that period.
Yeah, and then it definitely, I felt it definitely did. And there's now a lot of research behind cordyceps and VO2 max and endurance and energy, because it targets your cardiovascular system. And even people during COVID were taking cordyceps militaris to help them breathe easier when they got the disease, or the virus, should I say.
And it's a natural supplement.
Oh yeah, it's natural. It's a mushroom that grows, and then it has to be processed. So essentially what happens is the mushrooms are cultivated and they grow normally on a wood substrate. So they grow on trees, they can be grown in a greenhouse or whatever. Yep. The mushrooms are grown, and inside these mushrooms are very powerful health compounds, and that when you ingest into your body can really help you in multiple different ways. So some of the mushrooms have unbelievable anti-cancer properties. Some of them, like cordyceps, have unbelievable cardiovascular system properties. Lion's mane, which is also in this coffee, is called a nootropic. It's got powerful compounds that help your brain cells reconnect, essentially. So you're going to think more clearly, be more focused, be more productive. So all of these things, like people who have ADHD, for example, would swear by lion's mane as a product that they would take, a natural product that they would take that would help.
And that's in this coffee that you have there.
Basically what these mushrooms can do is they calm your nervous system down. They slow, if you have a racing mind, for example, they'll slow you down so you can actually think a bit more clearly, and you can just process things more clearly. So I know myself, like if I've got multiple businesses, if I have 50 people to employ that I'm employing, if I have all these myriad of things going on in my head, aside from having processes and systems that will help you with those things, the mushrooms will help just relax you and focus a little bit better. And then we have 3 mushrooms in this coffee, and the last one's reishi, which is something that will target. It's a mushroom that will target your immune system.
Where do you get your coffee then from?
This product is coffee mixed or blended with medicinal mushroom extract. Okay. So the mushrooms come as a powder.
Okay.
And that powder is then mixed in with the coffee that we've roasted and that we've ground. So it is coffie. And
so it's the coffee that you'd be selling in your coffee shops?
Yeah, it's a coffee that I sourced and handpicked myself. Because one of the problems, aside from all of the health benefits, one of the problems that I was solving was the taste issue but there are other mushroom coffee companies, and I've tried them all, and the one thing that I noticed was that they were using a terrible quality coffee. It tasted disgusting. And I wanted, if I was going to be doing this every day and drinking this, I wanted to enjoy the taste. I wanted to be good quality. I wanted to be using the best quality mushrooms. So I sourced the Brazilian coffee that has really, really nice flavor profiles, chocolatey, nutty, blends really well with mushrooms. The mushrooms themselves are very, very potent. They have a high concentration ratio. And that's important to note, because a lot of companies are selling mushrooms out there that are selling weak, low concentration mushrooms that are basically not going to have any effect on you. And this is the issue out there, one of the issues in the marketplace, where these guys are marketing all this stuff to you, and they're telling you how great the product is, but in reality it's a pile of shit.
So it's worth your while to have a slightly higher cost of production to create a product.
Yeah, like our product is expensive to make, and we sell it at a premium price for that reason.
I'm looking at the lovely pouch that I have now to bring home with me. Oil Focus mushroom coffee. It looks lovely. The packaging is good. It has a nice bit of branding on it. Where can I buy that?
That's on Shopify at the moment, so we're online only, Shopify or Amazon. And strategically, we're keeping it online. We're not going to go into retail or anything like that. So at the moment, we're just doing brand partnerships with say the likes of Hyrox or other. Oil is my passion project. I made this product for myself. It's improving me as a person on a day-to-day basis. It's making me better, I think. Anyway, that's
okay.
And
how quickly, like if I go and grab a cup of that now when I go home?
Some people are noticing differences after the first cup, but I would say realistically it's after about a week, because it's like there needs to be an absorption period. It can be considered a supplement.
Yeah, I will be giving that as well to my missus.
The power of nature is, it's not just consuming mushrooms and having them in your body, and coffee as well, because they're all natural products. It's just being in nature. It's going for a walk in a forest, or going a walk with your family in nature. There's a lot of introspection that I've gone over the last number of years, and nature has played a big part of that, whether it be running up the Dublin Mountains, or whether it be taking natural products. They've really kind of started, they've opened my mind, you know what I mean, to what's the potential of what I can achieve as an individual. I made this product to help other people reach their potential, if that's what they want to do. But this stuff is it's seriously powerful, and it's healthy. It's not like they're not psychedelic mushrooms. They're medicinal. They're good for you.
Maybe you can bring out a psychedelic.
Well, there's
pack,
psychedelics will be
definitely buy.
Yeah, psychedelics are slowly becoming legalized.
Yeah.
So Australia legalized them last year in clinical settings. Obviously, they're legal in Amsterdam. I think they're extremely powerful. Those psychedelic mushrooms, if you're going to do microdosing or whatever,
I have to be very careful.
Yeah,
you have to be very careful.
Very careful.
James, lastly, I brought you on here from knowing you, going way back, as you mentioned at the very start. I've been watching your journey online with the Dublin Barista School. I've looked at some of the podcasts that you do with Gary that look brilliant, very well put together. I wasn't expecting to get out of it quite this much. You've somebody who has gone through a hell of a journey, both personally and through business. And to see you standing opposite me now, looking fit, healthy, very focused, and raring to go for the rest of 24 is a great thing. And I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you very much. It was great.
Produced by the Mayros Future Company.